What happens when a guest known for staying calm suddenly responds in a way nobody in the studio expects? That's exactly the kind of moment viewers thought they were watching when Matthew McConaughey sat down for what seemed like a heartfelt conversation with Oprah Winfrey. What started as a discussion about life, personal growth, and overcoming challenges slowly turned into one of the most talked about exchanges of the week. Make sure to subscribe to Fame After Hours and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The audience welcomed Matthew with loud applause as he walked onto the stage smiling and greeting Oprah with a warm handshake. The mood felt relaxed. Oprah smiled and said, "It's always good to have you here. Every time you come on a show, people feel like they're about to learn something." Matthew laughed and nodded. "Well, hopefully I don't disappoint." The audience chuckled. For the first several minutes, the conversation moved smoothly. Oprah asked about his recent projects, his family, and the lessons he's learned over the years. Matthew answered in the thoughtful way people have come to expect from him. "I think life gets simpler when you stop trying to control every outcome," he said. The audience applauded. Oprah leaned forward. "But that's easier said than done, isn't it? Most people are struggling every day." "It is difficult," Matthew replied. "But difficult doesn't mean impossible." The crowd responded positively. As the discussion continued, Oprah shifted the conversation toward personal hardships. She referenced several stories Matthew had shared publicly in the past. "You've talked openly about challenges in your younger years," she said. "Looking back, do you think those experiences are what shaped the man sitting here today?" Matthew paused before answering. "I think they played a role, but I don't like giving pain all the credit." Oprah looked curious. "What do you mean by that?" "Sometimes we romanticize suffering. We act like every success story has to come from struggle. But I've learned just as much from joy, friendship, and gratitude." A section of the audience applauded. Oprah nodded but followed up quickly. "So you're saying hardship isn't necessary for growth?" Matthew smiled. "No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying growth can come from many places." The exchange remained friendly, but viewers could sense the discussion becoming more serious. Oprah continued, "Many people watching may feel their pain is the reason they become stronger, and that's valid," Matthew replied. "I'm just careful about turning pain into a requirement." The audience reacted with a mix of applause and thoughtful silence. Oprah looked down briefly at her notes before asking another question. "You think people sometimes avoid accountability by focusing too much on positivity?" A few audience members murmured. Matthew raised his eyebrows slightly. "That's an interesting question. Because some critics argue that motivational messages can oversimplify real problems." Matthew nodded. "They can." Oprah immediately jumped in. "So where's the line?" Matthew took a moment. "The line is honesty. If you're telling people to ignore reality, that's a problem. But if you're encouraging them to believe they can overcome reality, that's different." The audience applauded loudly. Oprah smiled but didn't move on. "Yet not everyone gets the same opportunities." "Absolutely true. So can everyone really overcome their circumstances?" Matthew crossed his hands and thought carefully. "Not everyone starts from the same place. Not everyone faces the same obstacles. But I believe everyone deserves the chance to try." The audience responded positively again. For a moment, it seemed the conversation would shift directions. Instead, Oprah returned to the topic with greater intensity. "Some people might hear that and say it's still an overly optimistic view." Matthew remained calm. "Maybe." Oprah looked directly at him. "Do you ever worry that your message sounds easier from someone who's already successful?" The audience became noticeably quieter. Matthew smiled politely. "That's a fair question." Oprah waited. Matthew continued, "I do think about that. A lot." The crowd listened carefully. But success doesn't automatically invalidate someone's perspective. A few audience members applauded. Oprah responded immediately. "No, but it can change how people hear it." Matthew nodded. "That's true, too." The discussion was still respectful, but viewers could feel a subtle tension building. Both were making strong points, and neither seemed eager to back away from the conversation. Oprah leaned forward again. "Let me challenge you on that." The audience reacted with interest. She continued, "If someone is struggling financially, emotionally, or mentally, hearing 'believe in yourself' may not be enough." Matthew nodded slowly. I agree. Oprah looked surprised. You do? Of course. Belief alone is enough. The audience murmured. Matthew continued speaking. Belief has to be followed by action, support, opportunity, and responsibility. Several people clapped. Oprah paused. So then why do public figures spend so much time talking about mindset? Matthew looked directly at her. Because mindset is where action begins. The audience applauded loudly. For the first time, Oprah appeared momentarily caught between agreeing and continuing the challenge. She smiled. You always have an answer. The audience laughed. Matthew laughed too. No, I don't. I just try to answer honestly. The mood lightened briefly, but it was clear the conversation was heading somewhere deeper. Oprah glanced at her notes one more time and said, Well, let's talk about honesty then. The audience immediately became attentive. Matthew leaned back in his chair. Let's do it. As the crowd settled into silence, the stage was set for a much more personal exchange, one that neither the audience nor the viewers at home would soon forget. The studio lights felt slightly brighter as the conversation shifted into a more direct tone. Oprah adjusted in her seat, folding her hands for a moment before speaking again. The audience had gone quieter than before, sensing the energy had changed from casual interview to something more serious and pointed. Oprah looked at Matthew. Let's stay with that idea of honesty, she said calmly, because honesty in public life is complicated. People hear you speak, and they don't just hear encouragement. They hear influence. Matthew nodded slowly, not interrupting. Oprah continued, and influence carries responsibility. Do you ever feel that weight when you're speaking to millions of people? A few audience members nodded along, waiting for his response. Matthew leaned forward slightly. Yeah, I do feel it. But I also think responsibility doesn't mean silence. It means being clear about what you're actually saying. Oprah raised her eyebrows slightly. But clarity can still be interpreted differently by different people. That's true, Matthew replied. But I can't control every interpretation. I can only control intention and honesty. A soft murmur came from the audience. Oprah didn't let the moment settle. Let me give you an example, she said. There are young people watching right now who are struggling with anxiety, depression, pressure from social media. When they hear public figures say things like, just believe in yourself, some feel like they're failing if things don't improve. Matthew listened carefully, his expression steady. Oprah continued, Do you think that message might sometimes add pressure instead of relief? There was a brief silence. Matthew exhaled lightly before responding. I think anything can add pressure if it's taken as a complete solution. Oprah tilted her head. So is it incomplete? Yes, he said. It is incomplete on its own. The audience reacted with soft applause, sensing agreement. Matthew continued, That's why I always try to talk about process, not just outcome. Belief is one part, support systems are another, and real-world effort is another. If any one of those is missing, then yeah, the message falls short. Oprah nodded but shifted again, keeping the pressure steady. But not everyone has equal access to those support systems. Matthew didn't hesitate. That's true, and that's where society has work to do. A few audience members clapped louder this time. Oprah leaned forward slightly. So then what is the individual's role versus society's role? Because people watching at home often feel stuck between the two. Matthew paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I think it's shared. Individuals have responsibility for what they can control. Society has responsibility for what individuals can't control. Oprah responded immediately. But that line isn't always clear. It's not, Matthew admitted. The audience reacted with quiet agreement. A short pause followed. The kind of pause that often happens when both sides are still engaged, but neither wants to rush the next statement. Oprah softened her tone slightly. You've been in this industry a long time. You've seen fame, criticism, support, all of it. Do you think people misunderstand you sometimes? Matthew smiled faintly. Probably. I think that happens to everyone. Oprah pressed gently. But do you think it happens to you in a specific way? The audience shifted in their seats again, sensing a more personal direction. Matthew looked down briefly, then back up. Maybe people assume confidence means certainty. And I'm not always certain. That line drew a stronger reaction, applause mixed with surprise. Oprah nodded slowly. That's interesting. Matthew continued, I think I speak with confidence because I'm trying to encourage people to keep going, not because I have everything figured out. The audience applauded again. Oprah smiled slightly but didn't ease the conversation. So when critics say motivational messaging can sometimes oversimplify life, what do you say to them? Matthew took a breath. I think they're right sometimes. That answer caused a noticeable reaction in the studio. Some applause, some murmurs. Oprah raised her hand slightly. You agree with them? In part, he said. There are definitely oversimplified messages out there. But I don't think that means all encouragement is harmful. The audience clapped again, more engaged now. Oprah leaned back for a second, then forward again. So, where do you draw your personal line? Matthew looked at her directly. I draw at honesty without pretending there's a shortcut. If I ever make something sound too easy, I think that does people a disservice. Oprah studied him for a moment. The room felt still. Then she said, but isn't even the idea of keep going a kind of simplification? A wave of reaction came from the audience. This was the sharpest challenge yet. Matthew didn't respond immediately. He nodded once, slowly. Only if it's taken alone, he finally said. If it's just words, yes. But if it's connected to real action, real struggle, real setbacks, then it's not shortcut. It's just part of survival. The audience broke into applause again, some standing slightly before settling back down. Oprah smiled, but her expression suggested the conversation was far from over. All right, she said softly, let's go deeper. And the entire studio seemed to hold its breath as the next question was about to change the tone again. Oprah shifted slightly in her chair, her expression more serious now, as the energy in the studio turned heavier. The audience was fully locked in, phones down, eyes forward. This wasn't casual television anymore. It felt like a real conversation people would talk about afterward. Oprah spoke calmly, but her tone carried more weight. Let's go deeper, like I said, she repeated, because what I keep hearing from you is balance. But life doesn't always feel balanced for people watching. Matthew nodded once, listening without interrupting. Oprah continued, some people are dealing with trauma, loss, things they never asked for. When they hear conversations like this, they sometimes feel like they're being told to figure it out on their own. A quiet pause followed. Matthew leaned in slightly. I hear that, and I don't think anyone should be told to figure everything out alone. Oprah immediately followed up. But that's how a lot of people interpret motivational culture. A few audience members murmured in agreement. Matthew took a moment before responding. Then I think the issue isn't motivation itself. It's isolation. If someone hears encouragement but doesn't have support, it can feel empty. Oprah nodded slowly. So what's missing? Connection, Matthew said. Real human connection. Someone to sit with you in it, not just tell you to push through. The audience reacted with soft applause, more thoughtful than loud. Oprah leaned forward again. But not everyone has access to that kind of connection either. Matthew didn't disagree. That's true, and that's a real problem. A brief silence settled again, the kind where the audience can feel something important is being said, but not yet fully resolved. Oprah shifted her tone slightly, almost more personal now. When you were younger, did you ever feel that kind of isolation? The audience reacted immediately. This was more personal territory. Matthew exhaled lightly. Yeah, I think everyone does at some point. Maybe in different ways, but yes. Oprah didn't interrupt. Matthew continued. There were times when I didn't really know who to talk to or what direction I was going in. You start learning how to sit with yourself in those moments. Oprah nodded. And what helped you through that? Matthew paused. Time, experience, and eventually people who came into my life at the right moments. The audience softly applauded. Oprah tilted her head. So would you say timing plays a bigger role than we admit? Matthew smiled slightly. I think timing plays a huge role. We don't talk about it enough. Oprah responded quickly. But if timing is that important, doesn't that reduce how much control people actually have over their lives? A ripple of tension moved through the studio. Matthew didn't react defensively. He stayed calm. I think it just means control is shared. Some things you control, some things you don't. Oprah pressed gently but firmly. That can be hard for people to accept, though, because it sounds like luck is part of success. Matthew nodded. It is part of it, but not the whole story. The audience reacted with mixed applause and murmurs again. Oprah continued, "So, how do you keep people from feeling discouraged when they hear that success involves luck, timing, and circumstance?" Matthew looked directly at her. "By telling the full truth, not just the part that sounds inspiring." That line shifted the mood again. Applause came quickly from several sections of the audience. Oprah smiled faintly. "You're saying inspiration without realism isn't helpful." "In most cases, yes," Matthew replied, "because people live in reality, not slogans." A few audience members clapped louder. Oprah leaned back for a moment, then forward again, studying him carefully. "But realism can also feel heavy." Matthew acknowledged it. "It can, but I think people are stronger than we sometimes give them credit for." Oprah raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like optimism again." Matthew laughed lightly. "Maybe it is, but I don't think realism and optimism are enemies." The audience responded with warm applause. Oprah smiled, but her tone sharpened slightly again. "So, if someone watching right now is at their lowest point, what would you actually want them to hear from you? Not the motivational version, but the real version?" The studio went quiet again. Matthew took a longer pause this time. When he spoke, his tone was slower. "I'd want them to hear that what they're feeling is real, that it matters, and that they don't have to rush out of it." The audience softened, a few nodding. He continued, "And I'd also want them to know that whatever they're in right now isn't the final version of their story." A stronger applause built across the room. Oprah watched him carefully, then gave a small nod. "That's probably the most grounded thing you've said all day." A light moment of laughter spread through the audience. Matthew smiled. "I've been trying all day." The tension eased slightly, but the conversation still felt meaningful, like it was building towards something larger. Oprah glanced at the camera briefly, then back at him. "All right," she said, "let's see where this goes next." And the studio once again prepared for whatever truth would come out in the final stretch of the conversation. The atmosphere in the studio had changed again, but this time it wasn't tension alone. It was a mix of reflection and anticipation. The audience had settled into a quieter rhythm, as if they were processing everything that had been said so far. Oprah sat with a calm but focused expression, while Matthew remained composed, hands loosely clasped. Oprah spoke first, her tone steady. "We've covered a lot today," she said, "but I want to bring this back to something simple. Impact. Because everything said on this stage goes beyond this stage." Matthew nodded slightly. "Yeah, it does." Oprah continued. "So when you look at how people react to your words online in real life, in their personal struggles, does that ever surprise you?" Matthew gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Sometimes, yes. People connect things in ways I didn't always expect." The audience listened closely. Oprah leaned forward. "Do you ever feel misunderstood?" Matthew paused. "I think everyone does at some level, especially when you're speaking in short clips in a very complicated world." A few audience members murmured in agreement. Oprah didn't break eye contact. "But in those clips, your words can become advice, and advice can become pressure." Matthew nodded. "That's true." The audience reacted softly, sensing agreement rather than conflict now. Oprah continued. "So what do you want your message to ultimately be?" Matthew took a breath before answering. "That people are capable of more than they think, but also that they don't have to rush their process. Both things can exist together." The audience applauded lightly, steady and warm. Oprah smiled faintly. "That sounds like the version of balance we've been circling all hour." Matthew chuckled. "I think we finally got there." A brief moment of laughter relaxed the room. Oprah then shifted slightly, becoming more reflective. "Earlier, you said something about connection being missing in people's lives. Do you think that's the real issue underneath a lot of what we discuss today?" Matthew didn't hesitate. "Yes, I think most things come back to connection. Feeling seen, heard, understood." The audience responded with soft applause. Oprah nodded. "That's something people don't argue with easily." Matthew added, "And I think when people feel disconnected, even good advice can feel heavy." Oprah agreed quietly. That's powerful. There was a short pause, almost like the conversation had reached a natural pause point. Then Oprah looked toward the audience. Before we end, she said, "I want to ask something I ask rarely." The studio quieted immediately. She turned back to Matthew. "If you could speak directly to the younger version of yourself sitting in that confusion you described earlier, what would you say in one sentence?" Matthew didn't rush. The room felt still. He finally said, "I'd tell him, you're not behind. You're not late. You're exactly where you're supposed to be learning from." A strong wave of applause filled the studio. Some audience members nodded visibly, reacting emotionally. Oprah smiled, softer now. "That's going to stay with people." Matthew gave a small nod. "I hope so." The energy in the room had fully shifted now. No longer debate, but reflection. Oprah glanced at the camera one last time. "And that," she said, "is where we'll leave it for today." The audience erupted into applause, louder than before, standing in parts as the moment settled in. As the show wrapped, clips of conversation were already being picked up online. Viewers would later argue about the tone, the meaning, and the back and forth between Oprah and Matthew, some calling it one of the most thoughtful exchanges in recent talk show memory, others debating whether public messaging carries too much responsibility or not enough nuance. On social media, reactions came fast. Some praised the depth of the discussion, highlighting the emphasis on connection and honesty. Others focused on the sharper moments earlier in the interview, replaying specific lines and analyzing every pause. After the show, behind the scenes, the mood was calmer. There was mutual respect rather than tension. Both Oprah and Matthew were seen briefly speaking off camera, acknowledging the depth of the conversation, without needing to find a winner or loser in the exchange. The audience slowly filtered out, still discussing what they had just witnessed, many calling friends or posting reactions before even leaving the studio. And as the studio lights dimmed, one thing was clear. What started as a simple interview had turned into a conversation people would keep replaying, not because of drama alone, but because of how real it felt. Share their opinion in the comments and subscribe to Fame After Hours for more real talk show stories.